Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel, where today I'm going to walk you through how I completed Path 4 in the Epoch of Pain quest using a team of Cosmic and Skill champs. Now this is the path that I ended up doing first, and I still think it's probably the easiest overall path if you have access to Serpent, and we'll cover that in a little bit here. Now before we get into the CASSIE Lang fight, I do want to spend a quick moment and talk about the global node, which is called Fancy Footwork. So you can see on the second row of icons there, we have the gray power drain timer, and every time that timer goes off, you're going to be fully power drained, and this is not something that you can prevent with an immunity, so somebody like Vox or Deathless King Root cannot get around this. The only way to get around it and prevent the power drain from occurring is either by being in a special animation when that timer goes off, or by dashing back when the timer goes off, and that will prevent all of your power from being removed. And this is a global node that you really can't afford to ignore for some of these fights, specifically for the GWENPOOL fight. You really don't want to be losing your power because you need to be throwing specials in that fight in order to deal damage. Now moving on to the first fight here against CASSIE Lang, I talked a second ago about if you have access to a Serpent, this path is probably going to be the easiest overall. Serpent can take every single fight on this path. Even if you have an Ascended 6-star Serpent, he is very, very strong, and hard counters what I think are the two most annoying parts of this path, which is this fight and then the PROWLER fight. So in this fight, Serpent has access to his True Focus buff on his first special attack. And once you have that True Focus buff up, you completely hard counter pretty much everything CASSIE has going on in this fight. She switches between like an evade node where she has a 100% chance to evade, and then she swaps into a node where all of your specials are going to miss, but the True Focus buff actually counters both evade and miss. So once you have that buff up, as long as you don't take a hit in the rest of the fight and lose it, you pretty much turn off all of CASSIE's annoying abilities. Now there are two other nodes in this fight that you do kind of play around a little bit. The first one, as you'll notice, is a Power Sting node where there's a timer, you get a Power Sting on you, and the way that you clear this Power Sting is by reaching a multiple of 10 in your combo meter. So you only want to throw your specials here when you have no Power Sting on you, obviously. And then the last node you want to worry about is a Crush node, where if you dash back too quickly, you get a Crush debuff on you for a few seconds. That's essentially going to make all of CASSIE Lang's attacks unblockable, but parrying in this fight is not really needed so much because you have access to that True Focus. You don't really need to play around the node where you would parry to gain the appropriate counter effect to either evade or miss. But you do want to watch out for Crush also, of course, because if you take a hit, you're going to lose that True Focus buff, and then you're going to have to kind of play around the node until you can get a special off again. Now with Serpent specifically, you can more or less play this fight straight up. However, I would recommend that if at all possible, you get to a Special 3 and use it at some point early on in the fight. You can see it took me nearly half the fight to get my Special 3 off here. Special 3 for Serpent is going to grant you this Hour of the Allfather passive, and essentially that just lets you ramp up his damage a lot faster. So it's going to make the fight, go a lot quicker, obviously. Now the other thing you want to watch out for in this fight, well, with any champ really, is try your best to push CASSIE to her Special 2. And remember, if you don't have that Crush debuff on you, you can safely hold block and bait heavy attacks, and then go in with a counter and push her to the Special 2 that way. The reason you want to do that is because her Special 1 places these combo detonation debuffs on you, and there's like 14 of them at a time, and if you don't get 14 combo up before those debuffs expire, they do a huge chunk of damage. The Special 2 essentially has no effect on it, which is why you want to push her to it as often as possible. Let's quickly cover some of the additional options I have listed. Deathless Thanos has access to that Panic debuff, which counters both miss and evade, so he works nearly as well as Serpent does for this fight. Vox has access to the Vigilance on a Special 2, so he can counter the miss but not the evade. Medusa has True Accuracy, she can counter the evade, not the miss. Similarly, Null has access to True Accuracy on his medium attacks, can counter the evade but not the miss. In the skill class, similar story. Bullseye counters miss. He has an evade counter with True Accuracy but doesn't have permanent uptime. Okoye also has access to Pursuit and can counter evade. Atuma access to True Accuracy. So some good counters, none of them as good as Serpent in my opinion. He is by far the best counter to this fight, and again, he can do every single fight on this path. So if you have him, you should use him for sure. Alright, moving on to fight number 2, we have this GWENPOOL here. And notice in the top right corner I have anybody marked down for the cosmic and skill classes. And truthfully, you can bring almost anybody to this fight and you're going to have success because it's almost entirely about how you play the fight and not who you bring. Mutants do have a little bit of an advantage here because they have access to prowess, but obviously you can't bring a mutant onto a cosmic and skill path. So we're going to go in here with Serpent and we'll talk about how the fight works. Now, you can only deal damage to Gwenpool in this fight with a special attack that has a prowess effect associated with it. You can see our basic attacks are essentially doing nothing, but our special attacks are doing quite a bit of damage here. Now, the way that you get prowess is by full dexing the last hit of her special 1, and then you can follow that up with a special attack of your own. Her using a special attack is going to give you a special attack, which is from the Matador node. Now, the problem in this fight, or the difficulty here, is not only from the fancy footwork node, so you need to be managing your special attack animations or dashing back in order to prevent that power drain, because if you don't use a special attack after a certain amount of time when you get a bar of power, you're going to take a huge burst of damage. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is the reverse controls that happen periodically through the fight. So there's a timer up there on the top left icon that switches between normal controls and reverse controls throughout the fight. And this can happen mid-combo, mid-special attack, it doesn't matter. You have to keep one eye on this timer at all times, because if you're like mid-special 1 dex and the reverse controls trigger, you're going to run right into her special 1, and then you're going to have a big issue on your hands. So if you take a hit from her special attack, you get this other timer on you, and you have like 4 seconds to do a light combo ender, or the game kills you immediately. So it's really, really dangerous to mess up the reverse controls. Now, Serpent doesn't have a direct counter to reverse controls in this fight. However, he does have very lengthy special animations. So one of the things that I'm trying to do in this fight is use my special attack at a time when I know that the reverse control timer is going to switch during the special attack animation. And that way I can kind of avoid a situation where they're going to switch while I'm baiting a special or while I'm trying to dex her special attack. And that makes things a lot easier. The other thing that I'm doing is that I'm never ending my combos with a medium attack. I'm sticking to medium and then 4 light attacks. And again, that minimizes the chances that I make a wrong input on that second medium and dash away or dash in when I meant to do the other thing. Now, because you're only getting 1 or 2 prowess at a time here, the fight is a little bit slow with a cosmic or skill champ. However, Serpent's special attacks do a ton of damage, especially once he's ramped up. You don't really have a chance in this fight to get to your special 3, so you really just need to rely on your special 1. But you can see, like, as we go through the fight, as he starts ramping up his Fury passives, these special attacks are really going to be hitting quite hard. Right there, you can see we're getting 15k bursts on every hit of his special 1, so the damage is just going to ramp up and up. Now, you would play this fight pretty similarly with just about anybody else in the Cosmic or Skill class, but one option I didn't list here specifically, but you can use is Gladiator. So if you play this fight with Gladiator, you can actually do the thing where when he's unstoppable from his special 1 with enough confidence, you can actually hit her during her specials and deal some damage to her that way. I think Karate Mike put out a video of him doing that when this fight came out originally, so if you're inclined to bring Gladiator to this quest, you might want to look up how he did that. It was really kind of clever. But again, like I said for the previous fight, if you have a Serpent, 6-star Serpent, 7-star Serpent, unduped, duped, doesn't matter, you should absolutely bring him to this quest. He is just so good for this path in particular. And I don't use him for every fight on this path, but I do solo every fight on this path, and I think 4 out of the 6 fights are with Serpent. So again, really, really good option here. I don't think I have anything else to say about this fight in particular. Looks like we're about to wrap it up here with one more special 1, and there we go. Alright, let's move on to the Iron Fist fight. This is really a fight that, again, you can use anybody for. However, there are a subset of champions that will do much better than the others, and Kate Bishop is one of those champions. Now, in this fight, you cannot gain any buffs, and he cannot gain any debuffs. So when it comes to damaging effects, only passive effects are going to work. Like Kate Bishop's Cold Snap, for example. Beta Ray Bill's Shocks will work in this fight. In addition, you can use champions who can ramp up their attack rating without being reliant on buffs. So I have Atuma mentioned in the skill class up at the top there. So the general idea in this fight is that you have this pressure gauge counter on you, and the counter goes up when you do basic attacks, counter goes down when you use a special attack, and when you take blocked hits. And if you ever let the counter go to 10 charges, you're going to take a huge burst of damage. If you ever let it go to 0, you're going to get completely power drained. And that's in addition to the power drain that's also going to happen via that fancy footwork node. So what you need to do in this fight is kind of balance your basic attacks and your heavy attacks to refresh your cold snaps, with purposely taking blocked hits during his special one. And you are going to be rooted during the special one, as you can see here, which makes it a lot easier to block those attacks. So special one has 3 hits to it. You can choose to block or dex as many of them as you want, and it really just becomes about managing that pressure gauge timer. Now, one of the reasons I really like Kate Bishop for this fight is, again, because her access to Cold Snap being a passive effect. You can see it does quite a bit of damage here, and you're really limited in this fight by how you're able to deal damage. And I think Kate Bishop is probably the best overall option for the Cosmic and Skill lane, just because she has such easy access to damage over time that he is unable to prevent. She doesn't need to rely on buffs to ramp up her attack rating. It just kind of happens when she gets those perfect release passives. So alternate options in the Cosmic and Skill classes. Beta Ray Bill, again, all of his shocks are passive. He won't be able to gain any of his buffs, his fury buffs or anything, but those shocks still should do a little bit of damage. You can use Serpent for this fight. He's still strong despite not having any of his buffs. Similar story with Thanos. Bullseye, all of his guaranteed crits are going to be really helpful in this fight, even though his instant bleeds I don't think will work here. Mantis, again, gets passive Furies if you want to try ramping her up, and Atuma's attack rating is going to increase based on his hydration, which is, again, not a debuffs on yourself, passes on yourself aren't going to account, so Atuma should work pretty well in this fight. But if you have a Kate Bishop, if you're comfortable with Kate Bishop, I would definitely recommend using her. Alright, moving along into the latter half of this path, and first up we have this Toad here we're going to be using Serpent for. Now this fight is pretty tricky. Again, you can more or less go in here with anybody. You definitely don't want to use any skill champs for this, which we'll talk about in a moment. Now in this fight, Toad is going to alternate his special attacks between rooting you during them, which is right now with that little like hand icon there. Once he uses a special, he's going to switch to reverse controls on his special attack. So you just need to keep one eye on that icon to know which action you should take. The rooted special dex is really easy. It's only 2 hits and you can time them pretty easily. Now baiting and then switching to reverse controls for a special one is a little trickier, and what I kind of trained myself to do in this fight is to watch his side of the screen for that purple unblockable text whenever I was trying to bait a special attack, and when I saw that text appear, I knew immediately that I had to switch to reverse controls in order to outdistance that special attack. Now the other thing you need to worry about in this fight is his prowess, which he will gain periodically throughout the fight. He'll gain it on a special one as well. You need to intercept to invalidate this prowess safely, and if you don't do that, eventually that's going to ramp up the strength of his poison effects, and you're going to lose a lot of health from the poisons. Now a poison immune champion is going to have extra difficulty in this fight, and it is even more important for them to be intercepting and removing those prowess, because if he gets like 9 or 10, he's going to trigger the passive stun on you, and then you're probably going to die. So poison immune characters obviously won't take the damage over time, but it is even more imperative for them to kind of manage those prowess effects in this fight. In this particular matchup with Serpent, I don't do a very good job, I feel, of managing his prowess. I kind of remember feeling like Toad was not playing into my intercepts very much, and as a result here you can see he's getting like double digits of prowess, and whenever I do get a poison on me, it's ticking for quite a bit, as you can see. My willpower's not able to out heal it. Now one extra thing you want to pay attention to with any attacker in this fight is you want to keep Toad away from his wall as much as possible, because when you hit him against his wall, he's going to trigger that paralytic secretion. That's going to give him extra regen passives, and if you keep fighting him against his wall, he's eventually going to apply more poisons, gain more prowess, and his regen is probably going to out-heal any damage that you can do. So you can see probably a few minutes ago now, I sensed that he was getting close to his wall, and I backed up like almost all the way across the arena, almost to my own wall, just to create some space for myself here. Alright, so let's talk through some of the alternate options I have listed for this fight. And again, in the Cosmic class, you can more or less use anybody. It really depends on if you want to risk it with a poison immune champion, or if you want to just go with a non-poison immune and potentially deal with some damage from those poisons. So Deathless Thanos is a really good option. He has so much damage available to him that he can pretty much nuke down this fight very, very quickly. He is not poison immune, so you don't have to worry as much about intercepting and invalidating those prowess. Vox is poison immune. He can also deal a lot of damage with his degens, but again, like I mentioned earlier, you really need to stay on top of the intercepting with Vox, because if you let Toad get too much prowess, you're going to get passively stunned, and if Toad has a special attack available while you're passively stunned, he's going to use it, and you're probably going to take all of your health, or almost all of it, in damage. Medusa also very good for this fight and in general. She is poison immune, so you do have to stay on top of the intercepts. In addition, she applies bleeds when Armor Shattered is up, so kind of like an extra risky approach with her. If you do decide to get the Armor Shattered up with her, every time you apply a bleed to Toad, he has a 20% chance to trigger that paralytic secretion and gain extra regen. So I would say that if you're going to use Medusa for this fight, you probably don't want to use Armor Shattered. Just spam, special 2s or whatever. Now in the skill class, I mentioned this earlier, you really don't want to use any skill attacker in this fight. And the reason for that is that if you try and purify a poison debuff with a skill attacker, it's going to be turned into a poison passive, and it ends up dealing more damage, and that damage will be pretty much unavoidable here. So really no skill champions in this fight. Any cosmic option that you have is going to be better than any skill option that you have for this fight. Obviously I'm using Serpent, but again, you can use any cosmic champ and they will do just fine. I don't really have anything else specifically that I wanted to say about this fight, so maybe I'll try and think of some other options in the Cosmic class that might work for this fight. If you have Beta Ray Bill on your team, which I do, he can probably work here. An interesting choice might be Angela, who will reduce the duration of the poisons that you get on you from him if you have enough buffs on you and her sig is high enough, so she's a pretty interesting option. Gamora can also do a lot of damage in a really short amount of time. Deathless King Groot can shrug off the poisons without getting the Purify penalty because he doesn't have an actual Purify, it's just like a straight debuff removal. But again, like I said a couple times already, pretty much anybody works in this fight. And one more special one from Serpent, and down Toad goes. Alright, moving on to the fight that I think for the majority of players is going to be the most annoying fight on the path, and that is Heimdall. Now, Heimdall is one of the newer seasonal Everest fights. I think he was one of the last ones that we got, so he might still be a little bit fresher in your mind than the other ones. Using Beta Ray Bill here, and I will talk more in a little bit about why I think he's really good, but let's talk through the mechanics of the fight. As you can see there, during Heimdall's heavy attacks, he's going to be unstoppable, and you're going to be rooted during it. It's very, very difficult to punish the heavy before that unstoppable goes away. You'll also see the little gray and blue unstoppable icon. That is a brace passive. When he has that up and it's blue with the white icon, he cannot be knocked down by specials or heavy attacks. You need to hit him during his heavy attack in order to put that brace passive on cooldown before you then knock him down successfully. You'll also notice that we're doing essentially no damage to him, and all the damage that you do to him during this fight is stored in that purple battery icon, and then when you knock him down, the damage that's stored in that battery is reflected back onto him by like 200%, and if he knocks you down, all that damage is reflected back on you. So really, really dangerous to be hit by a heavy attack or a special attack in this fight. Now, Beta Ray Bill is a good option for this fight because he has easy and very good uptime of a grit buff when he's using his heavy attack. And the grit buff allows him to attack unstoppable opponents as if they weren't unstoppable. So this effectively counters both the heavy attack from Heimdall and the brace passive, because the brace passive is more or less an unstoppable behind the scenes here. So with Beta Ray Bill, you can just do like your normal Bill rotation, SP2 into the SP1 to detonate the shocks, and you're going to be dealing enormous chunks of damage at one time. So right there, we detonated our first set of shocks that did like 20-30% in damage. We're going to go ahead here and do our second special one, and that's going to deal like almost 50%. So really, really good option for this fight. With any other option, Cosmic or Skill, and I have a bunch listed at the top there, you really just need to lean into the fight mechanics. Make sure that you tap him during his heavy attack to put the brace passive on cooldown, and then you can go ahead and use your special attacks to knock him down and reflect that damage to him. But if you have a Beta Ray Bill, he makes this fight really, really easy. Alright, last but certainly not least, we have this Prowler to cap off the path, and we'll be using Serpent here. Another really, really good fight for Serpent, specifically because with that true focus buff, he is going to properly counter the falter that you would otherwise get from punishing Prowler special. So very similar to the CASSIE Lang fight, which we talked about earlier. Just one special attack, and then not taking a hit after that is going to counter one of the most annoying parts of this fight, which is Prowler's falter. Now, the other stuff that you have to be concerned about in this fight, the first thing is that you need to be alternating your special attacks. So, much like the Hurt Locker node, you don't want to use the same special attack twice. There is an icon on your side of the screen that denotes which special attack you used last. If you do use the same special attack twice in a row, you're going to be giving Prowler an indestructible passive, and the only way to remove that passive is by using the correct special attack. So if you don't play into this alternating specials node, you're going to make the fight unnecessarily lengthier and much more difficult for yourself. The other thing that really helps in this fight is some sort of power drain immunity or resistance. And Serpent has 60% resistance to power drain, not full immune, but it's good enough. Now, in addition to the global node, which removes your power, you can't really turn that off. There's also Plagued Mind, so your power is going to be drained every so often. It's really difficult to tell the difference between those two timers, by the way. And then you have to deal with Prowler's own power drain, which is whenever you use a special attack, he attempts to drain the rest of the power that you had left over. And every time you get power drained in this fight, you're going to take some damage. So having immunity to that, having resistance to that, is going to lessen the amount of power drained, lessen the amount of damage that you take, and really allow you to survive longer in this fight. The other big benefit that Serpent gets in this fight is that he is immune to special lock. So whenever you cross a bar of power, you're going to be special locked for like a second or two, and this is designed so that you can't immediately use your special attacks once you gain a bar of power. You have to use them more intentionally. So Serpent able to get around this makes this fight, again, a lot easier for him. So again, this is like the third or fourth time I've said this. If you have a Serpent for this path, bring him for it and you won't be disappointed. Now let's talk through some of the alternate options for this fight I have listed above. Deathless Thanos, again, just like a damage-dealing machine. He can counter-miss with the Panic debuff. I don't think he has resistance to power drain, so you will have to kind of play into the power drain nodes there, but it shouldn't be too difficult, and he has ways of regenning his health with that Genesis passive as well. Vox can counter miss with his special 2, just get that Vigilance passive, or Vigilance buff up, sorry, and you'll be good to go. Deathless King Groot can deal some decent damage, also has full power drain immunity, so you'll be avoiding a lot of the damage here. Bullseye counters miss, of course, in the skill class, and don't have to worry about the falter there. Sable Okoye can also work here as well. That's going to do it for the Path 4 guide. Hope it was helpful for you. If it was, be sure to like, hit subscribe so you don't miss out on the next guide. Share it with anybody who's struggling on this path. And as always, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next time.